A Ruinous Habit. Written by Johnny Fist. Peter had one ruinous habit, an unshakable urge to give advice. Whether he knew the answer or not, whether he knew the person or not, none of that mattered. He always offered his counsel, fully convinced that everyone desperately needed it. Peter wasn't fond of reading. He read just enough to consider himself very smart and authoritative. Although, truth be told, even if he didn't read at all, his self-esteem wouldn't have suffered. 2 books a month, provided the print wasn't too small and the books not too heavy, was his absolute maximum. Sometimes he would even count reading a theatre program as having read a whole book and praised himself for it. He often insisted that every person had flaws, though he never included himself in that category. To himself, he was flawless. His job wasn't exactly demanding either. Most of his day he spent in the office of the local newspaper, writing short pieces he enjoyed enormously. Only one thing upset him: he wasn't allowed to write much. Every column was capped at 200 words, no more. He had to edit ruthlessly, because he typically had at least 5,000 words worth of thoughts and ideas, yet he was constrained to a measly 200. Humiliatingly little for such a great thinker, he believed. He'd gone to the editor-in-chief many times, begged, even kneeled on a couple of occasions, to let him be published anywhere other than the second-to-last page, statistically the least read. He wanted at least the second page, where columns were 1,000 words long. There he could finally give his thoughts room to soar, and as he assured the editor, the paper would gain new readers purely because of his astonishing pieces. No, mind-blowing, he'd correct himself. The editor, fully aware of Peter's writing and of what Peter could produce, resisted firmly. Over Peter's 14 years at the paper, he'd been allowed to write a second-page, long-form article only 6 times, and only out of necessity when the staff hadn't gathered enough material for those columns. The paper had an unwritten rule: not a single day of publication could be missed, or people might forget about it entirely. Quality could be sacrificed, but not the print run. So a few times, Peter got his chance to write more abundantly and more prominently. He framed all 6 of those newspapers, open to the spreads where his articles appeared, and hung them on his wall. On languid evenings, after a sip of red wine and a surge of romantic self-importance, he would stand before the wall and admire them. He read the lines over and over, though he knew every article by heart. Wake him in the middle of the night, and he'd recite each one down to the last comma. To avoid always being the villain who refused Peter's requests, the editor sometimes suggested he try swapping assignments with a colleague. Peter did. He viewed it as a chance and never understood why everyone always turned him down so brusquely. He never connected it with the fact that for years he had been constantly giving unsolicited advice to every single person in the office, again and again. Relentlessly, pointlessly, without arguments, brazenly. In short, he annoyed everyone. He thought he was doing good. To everyone else, he was a walking irritation, inserting himself everywhere he wasn't needed. That's why no one went with him to the bar on Friday evenings, to unwind and chat about clever lines from recent editions. If Peter walked left, everyone walked right. If Peter went to rest, everyone suddenly found work to do. He never realized it, but his co-workers even begged the editor to fire him. But that was risky. Peter was disciplined. He never got sick, always turned in his columns on time, and could be asked to write extra material when needed. For the newspaper, he was a handy backup. For the staff, he was an unwanted nuisance. Once, though, his persistence and self-centeredness played a cruel trick on him, and changed him for good. A crew of scammers arrived in town, smooth-talking, small-town hopping con artists who cleaned out fools and vanished without a trace. One Friday, Peter was sitting alone in the bar, as usual. When a newcomer walked in and exchanged a few words with the bartender, Peter, as always, jumped in with his advice. By chance, one of the scammers had walked in, unaware that luck was about to deliver him a score. He ordered a beer and chatted idly. Peter, unable to resist, offered him some advice. Unlike others, the visitor didn't recoil in disgust. He actually showed interest and continued the conversation. Peter, delighted to have a live audience, blossomed and began chirping like a nightingale. The scammer kept his distance but asked questions, showing interest in Peter's opinions on matters Peter himself had brought up. Peter melted. He felt a surge of energy, and if he had possessed state secrets, he would have revealed them all in this casual chat. Then Peter decided to play his trump card. After mentioning at least 5 times that he wrote for the newspaper, he moved on to the fact that he had been allowed to write 6 long, second-page articles, sometimes more widely read than the front page. The visitor showed interest and asked what those incredible articles were about. Peter could have recited all 6 verbatim, but as he began retelling the first, he stopped. The essence of newspaper writing, after all, was that the reader should hold the paper, open it, and read with their own eyes, imagining everything described in black and white. If Peter told the stories now, the listener would lose that experience. So Peter stood up and invited the visitor to his home, where he could read the masterpieces firsthand, with some good wine. The visitor, to remain convincing, pretended to refuse, claiming he was waiting for someone and couldn't leave. Peter had heard such excuses 1,000 times and always persisted. Once the scammer had given enough refusals for plausibility, he agreed and followed Peter. Luckily for him, Peter lived nearby, because Peter's endless chatter on the short walk was exhausting even for someone who saw clearly how easy the victim was. They reached Peter's home. Peter led him straight to the Wall of Honor and offered not only to read the articles silently, but aloud, while he fetched the wine. The visitor complied, glancing around and soaking a cloth in chloroform. Peter returned with the wine just as the first article was finished. He asked whether the visitor liked it. The scammer replied it was the best thing he had read in years. Peter was flattered. His guard dropped completely. Peter suggested continuing with the second article, his favorite. The visitor read on, waiting for the right moment. Peter stepped closer to the framed newspaper, eyes closed, a faint smile touching his lips as he listened to his creation spoken aloud. The visitor pressed the chloroform-soaked cloth to his face. Peter, still listening to the sound of his own writing, slid peacefully into unconsciousness. He woke near dawn. Looking around, he saw that almost everything of value was gone. Lamps, costume jewelry, chandeliers, dishes, money, everything but the furniture. At first he wondered how it happened. He rushed around, wanting to scream, call the police, cry, shout, demanding answers. But the final blow came when he glanced gently toward the wall with his articles. As soon as he saw it, he fell silent and wilted. Over each article, over each of his 6 magnificent pieces, someone had scrawled in large red marker, "Trash." His pride was ruined. It couldn't be cleaned, only torn out and thrown away. But if he left them, they'd be a wound on his heart. He no longer cared about the valuables stolen from his home. His greatest treasure was destroyed, and he knew the paper had no extra copies of those issues. His pride was gone forever. He was devastated. Peter never called the police. He told no one about the robbery. It would be too shameful. And if someone asked to visit and see the articles he'd bragged about for years, all they would see was a bare wall. He burned the disgrace, burned it, and scattered the ashes. After that, Peter never again gave anyone advice. In the office he sat quietly, writing his modest columns that would remain unnoticed. A few times the editor offered him a chance to write a long second-page article in an emergency, but Peter refused, claiming poor health. It was as though he had become a different person. He never again went to the bar or spoke to strangers, much less offered any advice. And so one ridiculous incident forever changed a romantic who, just the day before, believed no one had ever written, or ever would write, better than he did for a small provincial newspaper.